Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show. Today with me I have the Focal Celestee. Let's check it out. Okay, so early last year, Focal discontinued the Elysia, which was their mid-range closed-back headphone, and I felt as though it just left somewhat of a gap in Focal's lineup because even though they had a plethora of open-back headphones available in different price ranges, there was really only one closed-back, and that was the flagship Celestee, which of course came in at the flagship price of $2,990. Now in 2021 though, Focal has introduced the Celestee as part of their standard collection, and like the Elysia, which is its predecessor, it's a mid-range closed-back headphone that will set you back around $990. Before we get to talking about how the Celestee performs, we'll first go over the basics though, starting off with its accessories. Like the Elysia, the Celestee comes with a pretty bare-bones set of accessories. Packaged alongside the Celestee, you'll find a 1.2mm, 3.5mm to 3.5mm cable, a 3.5mm to quarter-inch adapter, and a Focal hardshell case in blue and copper to match the Celestee's finish. One thing I'd like to note here is that this is one of the best cables included by default with a Focal headphone, and it has seen great improvement. So it's made of like thick rubber and it's still a little bit rigid, but it's significantly more comfortable and flexible to use than the cables that were included with, for example, the Utopia, the Celestee, or the Elysia. I still wish it was a little bit longer, as at 1.2 meters, which is roughly 4 feet, it's still maybe even just a tiny bit short for desktop use, but nonetheless, the new design and material choice is a great step in the right direction. Moving on to build and comfort, it's as to be expected from Focal. The Celestee's design is great, and it sets a standard for how a premium pair of headphones should look and feel. Structurally, there isn't really much I can say about the Celestee. It's very well put together with no flaws that I can really identify in its fit and finish. Visually, the Celestee borrows many elements from the closed-back flagship, the Celestee, with an identical repeating circle pattern in the ear cups, albeit in the Celestee's new and rather nice navy and soft copper theme. For comfort, the Celestee fits similar to other Focal headphones. They're not the most comfortable out there, but they aren't particularly fatiguing or tough to wear either. They weigh in at around 430 grams, which starts to creep into the heavier side for headphones, but I did find that the headbands and pads do a very good job at distributing and relieving that weight evenly. One thing I did notice was the Celestee's pads were quite a bit more rigid than that of some other Focal closed-back headphones I've tried, and I found that mixed with the snug clamp force, it could create some pressure near the lower side of the jaw, something worth keeping in mind if you're sensitive to strong clamp force. Okay, so now let's talk about sound. Like the Radiance, the Celestee is utilizing Focal's 40mm M-shaped aluminum magnesium dome full-range speaker driver, and like other Focal closed-back headphones, it's also using box-shaped diffusers to combat in-cup resonances and standing waves. Now, right off the bat, I'll say that the Celestee struck me as having a drastically more balanced and refined frequency response than its predecessor, the Elysia. At the same time though, I can't help but to admit that having listened to the Radiance not too long ago, I was just a little bit disappointed by the Celestee's sound. That isn't to say that I thought it sounded bad, as it does have a pretty good tonality, but immediately I knew that for my taste and preferences, there was something about it that didn't allow me to enjoy it quite as thoroughly as the Radiance, which I really liked for its warm and relaxed sound. The Celestee still had some of that warmth, particularly in the bass region, but as it moved on to the mid-range, there were some accentuations there that I found could make the mids feel a bit too forward, and it also impacted some of the Celestee's timbral qualities. So talking first about the Celestee's bass response, I think it's sincerely excellent, and it reminds me of that of the Radiance as well as that of my ZMF Verite Closed. For bass extension, it delivers great performance as it seems to reach 20 Hz very easily with no roll-off that I could hear, and when you combine that with its generous bass shelf, it gives the sub-bass region a good sense of depth as well as a satisfying rumble, something that was sorely missing from the Elegia. As it moves into the mid-bass, there does seem to be a bit of a boost there between 100 to maybe 180 to 200 hertz, and this adds a bit of a satisfying contour in the bass region with a pronounced kick, and I think it's also likely where the Celestee gets that subtle warmth. Despite this mid-bass emphasis though, the Celestee's bass response is tight and it has very good articulation and a good sense of accuracy. I think that in this price range there's very little headphones that actually deliver this level of bass quality, and I think the Celestee is only second to the LCD2 in this regard. Moving on to the mid-range though, this is where the Celestee loses some of its charm for me. In the lower mids from about 300 to 1000 Hz, the mids are even and linear with a pretty good depiction of the fundamental tones that lie in that region. However, the upper mid-range is where things start to get a little bumpy. At around 1.5K, there is the same subtle resonance I've heard on pretty much all Focal headphones, which can give the mids this just slightly boxy character. Then in the presence region, 3K seems to have a slight emphasis to it, which for me made the upper mid-range come through as having some forwardness or a bit of a shout to it. Now, those two deviations weren't very noticeable, however, as the upper mid-range transitions into the lower treble, it sounded to me as though there was a fairly broad elevation between 5 to 6K, which for me unnaturally brightened the overtones in that region and made things like vocals and electric guitars come through as somewhat harsh. Ultimately, these three accentuations in the mids made the Celestee's timbral quality sound to me just a little bit tinny or maybe slightly metallic. Additionally, the highlighted upper mid-range region became slightly fatiguing for me over prolonged listening sessions. Now, of course, I don't think that this will be an issue if you use EQ, and it will vary per listener. However, if you're not comfortable with using EQ, or if like me, you're sensitive to the upper mid-range, then it's definitely something worth considering. As for the highs, aside from the elevation between the upper mids and the lower treble I mentioned, I thought that the treble range on the Celestee was great. To me, it seemed to be just a bit brighter than on the Radiance, but I thought that the added sparkle up top was nice, and it helped in fleshing out more of the harmonics in this region. It also sounded to me as though the Celestee had perhaps just a bit more energy in the air region above 10K, which added a nice glisten in the upper registers that was not quite as present on the Radiance. Moving on to technical performance and starting off with resolution, for its $990 price tag, the Celestee delivers outstanding detail retrieval and overall sense of clarity, matching the performance of headphones like the LCD2 and the Focal Clear. It just creates a very stable image of the music, with instrument lines being well defined and fully textured. I think that of all the closed-back headphones I've tried around this price range, the Celestee is definitely what I'd say is the top performer. Then as for its soundstage, it's not unlike other Focal headphones. The Celestee soundstage is a very intimate one. I was surprised though to hear that the stage felt a bit more forward than on the Radiance or the Elegia, and was instead more like that of the Stellia. Nonetheless, the Celestee keeps its stage clean and properly spaced by virtue of its precise imaging and layering, which work in tandem to create a soundscape that has depth and good directionality. For dynamics, the driver here is fast and has a very good excursive capacity. This allows the Celestee to deliver bass tones that are deeply satisfying with a nearly unmatched sense of punch and slam. Additionally, in the upper registers, the Celestee has a weighty snap and attack to it that helps in adding a sense of tactility for instruments like pianos, xylophones, and guitars, all which gain a more realistic presence. This probably goes without saying, but Focal headphones are renowned for their dynamics, and the Celestee is certainly no exception. It delivers a listening experience that is engaging and highly energetic. A note on sound isolation, since this is a closed-back headphone. Of all the headphones I've tried, the Celestee has been the one that most effectively blocks out outside noise. When using at my desk, I was not able to hear my fairly loud mechanical keyboard, and I got an unusual amount of comments about yelling into the microphone when chatting on Discord, which I think makes this a very convenient headphone that will be suitable for office use, gaming, or even traveling. Before heading into the conclusion of this video, I just wanted to mention EQ very briefly. Now, for the most part, I do think that the Celestee has a very good frequency response and one that most listeners will find enjoyable. However, as I've mentioned throughout this review, I'm fairly sensitive to the upper mid-range region, and on the Celestee, that did seem to be a bit of a slight hotspot. So my EQ seeks to cool that down, and for me personally, that just made the Celestee more enjoyable. If you'd like to try out my EQ profile for it, or for any other headphones that I've reviewed, there will be a link in the description down below to a post I've made on the Headphones community forums, which has all my EQ presets. Whilst I personally preferred the limited edition Focal for Bentley Radiance, the Celestee is, by its own merits, still a fantastic headphone. There are very few open or closed back headphones around this price range that really deliver the tonal and technical performance that the Celestee achieves. Taking a look at what the Celestee offers as a whole, it's a very well-rounded headphone with an impeccable build and a musical listening experience that also has all the benefits of a closed back headphone. Definitely a headphone worth keeping an eye out for. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the Celestee or other headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show. And until next time, this is Chrono signing off.